This is episode 36 of the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I'm Carly Kade, and today I'm speaking with Elaine Sturgess. Elaine is a British-born author who spent 30 years in marketing and media before writing her first book, Gin and It. The novel, a mystery, a love story, and a comedy, is dedicated to the memory of her partner, Marie, and like her, it's racy, funny, tender, and wicked. Loss and grief changed Elaine's life, and she left behind her previous career and home to become a full-time writer and filmmaker because it's never too late to realize your dreams. She is the founder of BooksOffice, which has been created to find the best stories out there in a new way that shines a light on hidden and new talent with a mix of industry curation and audience participation. The BooksOffice system helps authors present their story in a unique way for their entertainment professionals, and it also opens up the chance for readers and viewers to help uncover future screen gems and decide what they want to see. It's a level playing field for traditionally indie and self-published authors and a new platform for unheard voices. On BooksOffice, it's not about how many books you've sold, it's about how good your story is. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Kade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. Today I am so excited to have Elaine Sturgess with us. She's going to talk to us about a really exciting topic, which is taking books to screen. Hi Elaine, how are you today?
I'm great. Hello, Carly. It's lovely to be here with you.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on the show. This is going to be a great conversation. But I always think a great way to start things off this is a little bit different because you are not a horse book writer per se, but you do have some cool equestrian skills in your background. Do you want to share a little story about how horses kind of crossed over into your life?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, it was kind of an interesting and quite unexpected scenario because I used to run a little marketing consultancy. I lived in a chocolate pox village in a 300-year-old house in a little place in Oxfordshire. And one day a guy wandered into the office and sat himself on the sofa and started telling us that he had a project that he wanted some help with and that we might be interested. And it turned out that he was the event director for Windsor International Horse Trials, which is an event that is run by Princess Anne, and he wanted us to handle their marketing. So we were kind of thrown like headlong into understanding and finding out about 3-day eventing, which is actually an incredible sport. So so there is some kind of crossover there.
Yes, and just like anyone else in the world, book authors need to do marketing. So, and then marketing and horses and all these different things kind of all connect together, which is so exciting. And you got to meet Princess Anne, isn't that right?
I did, yes. In fact, I had several meetings actually. I managed to have a meeting with her, which was amazing. It's quite intimidating, to be honest. She's kind of quite a tall lady, and you have to curtsy and you have to remember all the protocol. But as it turns out, she was really lovely and very welcoming. But I also got to go into the private residence at Windsor Castle, which was just extraordinary. It's kind of like one of those areas that hardly anybody gets to see, which was an amazing experience. So yeah, I was really lucky. It was incredible.
Oh, that sounds like a fairy tale almost. In fact, it's like I'm over here in the States, and we don't have the same kind of royalty or tradition. So it's like it's really exciting hearing stories. And the royals love horses. The queen loves horses.
Totally.
That's like the horse culture is very strong within the royal family. So that's so cool. And then So you were in charge of the marketing for this particular event. So I imagine
Mhm.
that included working with the press and writing press releases and generating probably a social community. All sorts of things probably went into this. So you had to dive headlong into getting to know horses and what people like about horses and how the event works. So you probably have quite a bit of knowledge now after coming out of working that
Yeah,
event.
I mean, it was an interesting challenge, and she wanted to do things differently. They had been working on the event for quite a long time, and they wanted to engage particularly younger people
Mm,
with equestrianism. So we had to come up with also some kind of interesting angles on it to bring new people in. So it was quite a challenge. And it was one of those things where you think you've got plenty of time, and then actually when you start getting into it, there was so much involved, but it was extraordinary. I loved it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's so exciting. And, we're going to talk about this a little more as we get into the interview, but you do enjoy taking on big projects. And we're going to talk about one of those here coming up in a minute. But first, you are an author. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your writing life and about your books. So tell us, like, what excites you about writing books? How did you first decide to become an author? Where did that come from?
Well, I've kind of been in writing and publishing all my life because I actually worked in a publishing company, and in fact, I think that the background that I had is quite interesting for authors that I talk to, because I worked for a company called Book Club Associates,
Mm,
and this was quite a long time ago, and it was actually the predecessor to Amazon,
mm,
because it was an organization that sold books through the post. I think Random House ran a similar thing in the States.
mhm.
I ran the two biggest book clubs. So I was kind of deeply involved in direct marketing. And those kind of techniques are still very valid today. I
Oh,
mean, we use
sure.
different methods, but the techniques are kind of are very similar. And so I've been involved in copywriting and writing in relation to books for years. And I've written articles and poetry, all sorts of areas that I've dabbled in. I actually started writing my first novel based on my own experiences of moving to this little village in Oxfordshire, because it was quite an extraordinary experience. Because it was in the 90s, and I'm gay, and I moved there with my wife, and it was a kind of like we're the only gays in the village, and we were kind of a little bit worried about moving into this quite conservative place.
I'm sure.
Um, and it turned out that we were very popular, and we were invited to lots of parties, and eventually discovered that because we had moved into this little area of swingers, they were trying to recruit us. So my story is based on that experience, but I've kind of amplified it.
Wow,
Um,
that's quite
so
an experience. I mean, but how lovely too that you were embraced, and then you were being recruited by singers. Oh goodness,
that,
that makes for a great book subject.
yeah, bizarre. And the village was what like, again, like the equestrian angle. It was a very traditional village. They had a
Mm.
hunt. The typical hound
Yeah,
hunting. So
yeah,
yeah,
the fox hunting.
very yeah, rural. Yeah,
There's all sorts of quirky things going on in all sorts of places, right? So
you just don't know what's under the surface.
so this experience like spurred on the idea of writing a book. So do you have that book there? Is this book
I
available?
do. This is my book. It's called Gin and It.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of I went through a really interesting journey with it. Sadly, my partner died,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and I couldn't write for many years. I kind of went to it was like the grief was very difficult to deal with, and but about 5 years afterwards, I kind of sort of cleared out my head of what was going on, and in doing it, I was able to write again. And what was really lovely is that I managed to write it with a lot of her memories in it.
Mm.
And she was kind of a very funny, very wicked person, and so there's a lot of her wickedness in the book. It's kind of like, in a way, it's a sad story, but it's also, you know, it's kind of taught me a lot about life, and it's taught me a lot about delivering something very real in a book.
Yes.
I think is actually important for us. I think telling our stories is a really important part of growth and life for other people, to identify with our experience in life, because we're all, we're all in the same boat. It's kind of, we all need to learn from each other. So it's been a very cathartic experience, and it's been a fun experience. And I really wanted to tell the story so badly that I actually decided to make a trailer, not a typical book trailer, but a trailer as in a movie trailer,
Mm-hmm.
as if I had already made the movie to promote the book. And that's led me on a whole, bigger journey in terms of film and TV, which has been really interesting.
Yes, and that's why we're here today. So and thank you for sharing that very personal story. And I completely agree with you that I think the reason why people write, and I truly believe that books show up in people's life when there's something for them to learn.
So,
We're all, like you said, we're all in this soup together. Everybody's dealing with something, and we learn from each other. And I just wanted to make sure. So Gin in it it's fiction based on real life. Is that correct? Just so I
it
got
is.
that right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and what a lovely testament. I'm sorry for your loss, but you did something magical with that grief, and you honored her. And I think that that's like a really special thing to be able to do. And I'm sure, like you said, it helped you express some of the grief that you're probably experiencing. And that's a touching story. Thank you so much for being so raw and open with your emotion around your book. uh,
Thank
which actually leads us, you mentioned this, so this is generally how you became interested in taking books to screen, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, because you have developed BooksOffice, which is a platform for taking books to screen.
Mhm.
So talk to us about how you got the idea. How did you get started? Where did this books to screen interest come from? Talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, I have this belief that there are a huge number of stories out there that are told in the pages of a book that that never make it to the screen. They never are sort of realised in that way. And the traditional process is, if you're lucky as a writer, perhaps you might get an agent. An agent goes to a publisher. The publisher pushes the book. If you are one of the very small minority that actually get to the very top, you have a bestseller, and then the bestseller gets picked up and it gets made for the screen. And the premise, obviously, is that there's an audience waiting to see that story. But if you think about a script has no audience. So the only difference between a script and a book is format. They're just written a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So in actual fact, it seems to me that there's like this massive potential to take stories that are already within a book, but maybe have not reached the status that you might expect as a producer to take it on, and make the industry aware that there is a desire for those stories to be told. So that's really what BooksOffice is about. Um, and the way that we've set it up is that writers can add their books to the platform, and we offer, that's free, and you can link through to Amazon and promote your books that way. So that's just a kind of a way of helping people sell their books.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also submit your book to one of our projects. And each of our projects is to find a story to adapt for the screen. But principal way we find that story is to open that up to the public.
Mm.
So what we allow every reader and every viewer to do is to come onto the site. They get 5 free votes. They go and look at the project and the stories in the project and pick the one that they would like to see on screen.
I love this concept. I think it is so cool. So okay, so I'd love to take the route of the journey of the author who comes onto BooksOffice and puts their books in there. Like talk us through how, because Michelle Holland, who is a fellow horse book author who was just on our show, did submit her books to a book to one of the projects, and she was chosen for her book to be developed into film. So so I want to follow the journey of the author who gets involved with BooksOffice first, and then perhaps we'll shift over to the voting process, like for the fans, like how that works, because there's two different ways that this works. So let's talk first from the author perspective. So say I take one of my books or all of my books, I have a book series, and I've already put them on BooksOffice, they're already there. So how does it work for me? What are next steps in deciding what I want to do with my books?
So let's say, for example, that you felt your book fits within the genre of drama.
Mm-hmm.
When we launch a drama project, you can then submit your book to that project. And what the system guides you through is seeing your book as if you were presenting it to a Hollywood producer. Mm. And so what you will do is you will go through the process of creating what we call a movie deck or a series Bible. And it's a guided process, and it encourages you to create a log line, which is the typical way in which you crystallize what your story is about if you were presenting for a film. Your story arc, which is a little bit different to when you write on the back of a book. You know, you have a story synopsis, but you don't really give very much away. It's kind of just a tease. Mm-hmm. But when you're pitching for a movie, you have to give a little bit more about the story arc. It encourages you then to describe your characters so that the reader who comes on can start to identify with your characters and start to see what your characters look like. And then it asks you to compare what your story might feel like or seem like if someone were to come and see it. And we encourage you to do that by saying, what would a reader or a viewer think that it might be similar to?
That makes sense. So,
yeah. And actually the movie industry is doing that more and more. It's kind of like, what's my viewing experience going to be like, you know? Mm-hmm. And then you can create a little 30-second pitch video, which could be it could be you saying vote for me, as in like presenting why your story will be really engaging for the viewer, or it could be a little synopsis of the story presented visually.
I love that, and I love that it's guided. Because a lot of authors probably they need to get educated on how the process of doing this for film or screen works, so it's a guided process. So I decided I want to put my book in the drama project that you've just launched, because that's what's available just then. I go through this process. This is not I have to write a script yet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I do all the marketing basically of the packet of what the movie would be. And then on the other side, so say my book is selected in this drama category, what happens after that? Do you have like film producers already looking for this sort of thing that you're going to share the winners with? Like how does it, what happens after you win?
Okay, so once you've submitted it, and then basically it's kind of like drumming up interest. We drum up interest on your behalf, mm-hmm. and you drum up interest to get people to vote. We have had the most amazing response to BooksOffice from the industry. And we've literally only just run our first project. We've started having meetings with production companies. Literally, literary managers with major production companies are asking about what we have and how they can get involved. So wow. It's a fantastic opportunity. And we when we came up with the concept, it wasn't possible really to understand quite how it would evolve and how it would be received. But I have to tell you, it's been amazing. And if you're an author, you literally have nothing to lose. Get on there, because people are looking. They're looking for stories. And with the development now of so much streaming material, with so many channels proliferating, they need content.
Mm-hmm.
And they want quality content, but they want to be able to qualify it. And that's one of the things that BooksOffice does. Because first of all, you're going through that conversion process of pitching your story in a different way, in a way that they can understand.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also bringing audience. And that's the really key thing. It's like they're going, okay, well, people want this. People want this story. And it's not just about the winner either. It's like, it basically, it's putting a spotlight on the stories that are on there. And people are starting to realize already what the quality of writing is out there, that there are these stories that maybe aren't rising to the surface through the typical channels,
Mm-hmm.
but nevertheless are worthy of considering for this kind of process. So actually, it is literally causing a stir.
I was just going to say, this is like game changing, and you're just in the infancy of it. You are essentially a startup right now, and you've just completed your first project. I can only see the potential that this has as it continues to grow. That's amazing. So, and I love that, and I do agree with you. I think that the way things are done, like independent publishing for authors, has changed the way book publishing works, and I think that the same is going on with how people are consuming TV and movies. And thank you for explaining the journey of the author who wants to get involved in what that looks like. Now let's talk about the audience that the author brings to BooksOffice, and kind of guide us through what that process looks like for, and I think that you're talking about not necessarily authors of books, but fans of books, or people who are just fans of this whole movement in and of its own right, that want to come on there and support this. So like, what does someone just coming on to BooksOffice that doesn't have a book to submit for a project but wants to see what's going on and participate, like, what does that journey look like?
Sure. Well, first of all, I should say that journey at the moment is in its infancy. We've got lots of plans that are going to make this really exciting. But so I'll tell you how it's starting and then how it's going to evolve, because I really want people to stick with the journey, because the stuff that's coming in the future is really exciting. So first of all, everybody who joins, it is free to join, and you get 5 free votes for each project. And you can choose which books you can choose. You can choose 5 books and give them 1 vote each. You can give 5 votes to 1 book, however you want to play it. Mm-hmm. You can earn more votes by inviting friends. So if you invite 2 friends, you get 5 more votes. So you can vote, support your authors more, and the people who you bring in get free votes too. You can also purchase votes. If you purchase votes, that money goes into the development fund that we use to support our authors, but it's also a reward scheme. Mm. And the reward scheme, basically, the more you get involved, the more you get rewarded. Mm. And the reward scheme includes free books, for example, but it also goes right up to the opportunity to come to our film set. Ooh. And spend a day getting behind the scenes and meeting everybody, and potentially, if the circumstances are right, being an extra in the filming.
Well, that's fun.
So that's fun. We're also moving into the direction where we want people to get involved with grading the books, to tell us how good they think they will be in terms of adapting for TV. So aside from the voting, you get to tell us the books that you think are really important. And we're really keen to get people's opinions, because I have this feeling that it's like, if you get a small group of people who really like a story, if a small group of people like a story, then the likelihood is a big group of people will like the story.
Mhm.
So we want to get to the point on the website where people can literally say, do you know what? I think this should make a great TV series. And it will give them the ability to create a cluster of people around that story. And if they grow the cluster big enough, we will make a pilot or a trailer of that story.
Wow.
So the future, and that it'll take us probably another year or so to develop the system to do that effectively, because we have to have enough people on board to make it happen.
Mhm.
But literally, there is the opportunity to. It's almost like you can be a producer.
That's neat. I think that that would be neat for anyone who's interested in film or taking books to movie, to be behind the scenes to see how these things work. I love that. And then I was wondering too, and I know that your member journey is going to grow as you continue to grow, because we're talking like right at the beginning of Books Office, and we will certainly have you back on the show as things develop to talk more about the growth and the projects, right? Because you're just about to go into developing your first project for screen. So I would love to have you back a little later so we can talk about what that journey was like. But when an author submits their book and then you help them work with pitching it to companies that want to make film or TV, uh, is there like some sort of contract where, because obviously you have to make money, right, in order to support this platform that you've created? There's an opportunity through sort of this membership for fans kind of space that you're developing. But is there any contractual agreement between the author around the intellectual property and then Books Office getting a little bit of whatever happens with the movie development in order to keep you
Yeah,
afloat?
we're basically like an agent,
Hmm. Okay.
and we're very because it's new. We have to maintain some flexibility in terms of how we make that work. But essentially, there, there's lots of ways that you can take a story and develop it. So the first thing is that for the winning author, we will create a trailer or a short movie of their story, and we'll basically take them on that journey. In the industry, it can be quite difficult for a journey to for an author to be involved in the journey of development, because
Hmm.
what tends to happen is that someone takes an option on a book. That's it, it's gone. They basically do whatever they want to do with it. With our winner, we'll basically get them very involved. They'll get involved with script writing, they get involved with casting, they'll get involved in see how we find the location, how each of the team looks at their story. And I mean, that was one of the fascinating things for me in making we actually filmed enough for a short for Gin and It, was seeing how each of the people involved in the filming process has a viewpoint.
Mm.
And a cinematographer is looking at, how can he make his camera work to get the best angles? Where does the light come from? And he's kind of looking at scenes and locations and saying, how do we recreate this story? And a director is looking at the actors and saying, this is how I want them to deliver. And an actor is saying, this is how I see this line. So the reality is that you get all these people who all have an input into the way in which the story evolves. And it is amazing if when you finally get on set and these people suddenly arrive, and over 4 or 5 days, they shoot, most of them have never met before, and between them they make this amazing creation, and it is phenomenal.
Wow.
And then after that process, then an editor, and you can cut that material 1,000 different ways and get 1,000 different results.
That's right.
And it's just an incredible process. So for us, one of the things that's magical for the author who wins is for them to see that,
Mm.
to experience what it's like to see their story brought to life on screen.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that is great, because that is, you're right. The author of the material often, someone will option their book and then it's like, bye, you don't have a input, or you don't even get to see how it develops. And as an author, I would love that experience to be able to see, because I have a vision of what my books would look like as a movie, and I feel like almost having the author on board. I mean, there's obviously so many talented creative people that are involved in creating film, but I feel like what you're doing is great, because having the author on board, you might actually get better movies, because you're with the living, breathing human that created these things, who has the vision. And particularly for me, when we talk about horse movies, I would want to be on set anyway, because I would like to see a good horse movie made. Often what's going on with horse movies is that the people that are making them, they don't get the tack right, or they, add sound effects where a horse wouldn't make the noise, or the people aren't wearing the right attire, or, it's not authentic to what a real equestrian would see. So having someone like that on set would make sure that the things were done correctly, so.
I completely agree with you. And I think authenticity is something that needs to evolve more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite interesting because in reading Michelle's book and understanding that where she's coming from in terms of telling the story. So her story is about Jacob the dog, but it's told from his perspective. And so you suddenly start to see, okay, let's be inside Jacob. So you imagine your camera is inside Jacob, and you see the world from Jacob's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to then suddenly recognize, wow, a car must look really fast from down there in that,
Yeah.
and then you start to understand what Michelle wants to deliver. And then so if you involve Michelle in that process, and she can convey what she's trying to deliver in that story, then the story is going to have more value. It's going to give a more powerful message. And so I'm really excited about that journey, because we're all going to be dealing with a story that's completely new to us. And I think there'll be some really interesting, apart from the story itself, the technique of being able to deliver filmically something that's coming from literally every view is inside the dog will be really interesting. And I think it will be really interesting for people to engage with that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I love this. And the book you're referencing is Michelle Holland's Inside a Dog's Mind. Is that what the book's called? Yeah. And I will link to Michelle's episode here, so you can learn a little bit more about Michelle, or in the show notes, I'm sorry. So you can learn a little bit more about Michelle, because Michelle introduced me to Elaine and BooksOffice, and that's how the world works, right? We were introduced through our circle of influence. So the reason why Elaine and I are talking today are because of Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. And and I love this. So like, as we're talking today, you're at the beginning. I love this concept. I love what you're creating. Thank you for doing this. Where do you see BooksOffice and what you're up to in like 5 to 10 years? What do you envision?
I would love to think that that BooksOffice will be powerful enough for audiences to be able to say, this is what I want, and it gets delivered, and that their journey goes with the story from book to screen. And I would love to think that in that process there is more diversity, there is more representation, there is more variety. I mean, I'm not alone. There are a lot of people in the industry, in the publishing industry, and in the entertainment industry itself, who are frustrated by the narrowness of the programming that we see. And I think that does have to change. I have this. I love the quote by the quote that says that life imitates art more than art imitates life. And if our art, in terms of our entertainment, in terms of Oscar Wilde, wasn't it? Yeah, who said that? And it's if our art doesn't represent us, if we don't feel represented in our art, and life follows art, then we don't feel represented as people. And that's really important. I mean, it sounds grand, but I really do believe that entertainment is such a big part of our lives that it does inform our future. It does affect, how we grow and develop. And in order for us to feel accepted in all our diversity and all our individualism. We have to be represented. And so I would hope that in 5 to 10 years' time, I've had some influence in helping stories that represent humanity in a broader sense get onto the screen. If that happens, I'll be a very happy person.
Not if, when. I believe. I believe that that you are going to achieve that, and thank you for passionately sharing where you see this going, and I agree with you, and I'm so excited to see where this goes, and I believe that you are going to have an impact of that magnitude, maybe even before 5 to 10 years. So I'll be in your corner rooting for you.
Hey, thank you.
What I also like about what you're doing is it says on the BooksOffice website that as an indie or self-published author, you'll be aware of how tough it can be to get your book to the top of the pile and reach the audience it deserves. Well, BooksOffice may just be what you need to make you stand out from the crowd, which we've sort of already talked about. But, talk to us about the challenges indie authors, because I'm an independent author, and I think there's like a big movement around independent publishing right now. And there's a lot of us, particularly a lot of the people I'm talking to that are equestrian authors are in the independent realm. Talk to us about the challenges indie authors face in this regard and how BooksOffice specifically helps independent authors. But I understand that you will also work with traditionally published authors, right? So this is like, no one's excluded, but you are putting a spotlight on independent publishing. Am I right?
Absolutely. And so I think, before I launched BooksOffice and when I was looking at marketing gin in it, I really did quite a lot of research into the condition of the market and how methods of marketing have changed. And here is something that's kind of interesting that people need to be aware of, and that's that Amazon now controls more than 50% of book sales worldwide. And they have done something amazing in terms of opening up the world, in terms of the capability to publish. But at the same time, they've kind of shut some doors. And part of the issue is that they are the only people who have the information about audience. So they have a massive advantage in the marketplace. I mean, they own Goodreads now, so they have that, under their belt as well. And if I were to give one recommendation to an indie author, is create a database. Make sure you know who your customers are. And you can still sell your books through Amazon, but come have just a one-page website, simple website with a form on it. Create a way to engage your customer and collect their information. That's the only way you're really going to have authority when it comes to developing your sales. So that would be my biggest recommendation. Somebody told me the other day something like 98% of authors don't even have a website. The reality is that most people write a book, they finish the book, and then they go, now what? And there's an awful lot of authors who think that if you put your book on Amazon, they're going to market it for you. And they don't. The only time that Amazon markets your book is if you're in their top 100 seller list. And there are 10,500 top seller lists on Amazon. If you're in one of those, you've got a chance. But the major publishers have learned how to play those lists. And so even though when that technique was originally developed, indie and self-publishing authors could find those little categories where it was easier to get a limited number of sales and get into the seller list and start that program going, that doesn't happen so much anymore because the big publishers have learned how to dominate those lists. So really, you need to have some control over who your customers are in order to move forward. The other thing I would say is collaborate, because if you have one book, it's so tough, to make a dent in the market. And we're not all, prolific authors. Some people write a book and that's their baby, that's their kind of like real achievement in life. And it's really frustrating if you feel like you can't reach an audience with it. So if you are in that case, if you've got one book, if you've got a limited number of books, collaborate with other authors and be open about supporting each other. Sometimes we get a bit defensive. It's like, well, if I'm selling my book, I don't want them to sell their book. The truth is that readers are really keen to read more.
Mm-hmm.
So collaborate with other authors, help each other create audience and share audience, because that's really how you're going to grow. We are going to actually be developing some writer services on BooksOffice. I've got an amazing development team, and we've come up with a plan to create. There's a site called Wix where you can go and build a website.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do kind of Wix for authors.
Oh, cool.
And so we're going to try and make it really easy for you to put your book onto a little website and start engaging customers and building a database. We've got loads of plans. We've got script writers are starting to develop script writing courses.
Oh, cool. I love that. That's awesome. These are all next steps that authors need to learn about if they're interested in taking their books to film. And I love that the concept is to create a platform where they can go and get everything in one spot and help guide them through the process. I love that. Sorry, I continue. I was just really excited because I want to learn. I want to learn about script writing so much.
Yeah, well, the script writing thing is really important, and I'll tell you something that's quite interesting. Or there's this sort of belief in the entertainment industry is that people go, oh, there's not enough money, or there is money. The biggest lack is good scripts.
Mm.
And so what we're going to do is developing some courses that are specifically about adapting a book.
Cool.
Because it is a different technique to free writing a script, with a story. So we've got some people lined up to help us develop that. Another thing that we are doing is a lot of people use Calibre to convert books. So we're going to offer people you can either just test, you can upload your Word manuscript, create it in any format that you need for a reader, and make sure it's coming out the right way. And if you want to put it somewhere else, that's fine with us. But you will also be able to load up your books on BooksOffice.
Oh, wow, that's great.
We've all got all sorts of little plans to help. And what you said before, you put the nail on the head, all in one place.
Mm.
One of the things that's really challenging is like you've got a website. Now you have to get a MailChimp or a mailing list. Then you have to link your website to the mailing list. And then you have to work out how to give people free books if you want to do reader magnets and da-da-da. And it's like this complicated process of going from one place to another to try and put it all together. And we're going to try to put it in one place for you.
Oh, awesome. That would be helpful. Yeah, because it's like you start with this ball, and then it's like sticking gum, with all these different things that you have to keep building onto what you created. It's like you wind up with this gigantic gum ball that's linked to all these different places. It's like new thing, Yeah, that has been my experience. Is that it's like it's like one baby step at a time, but this thing that you end up building, a few years in, is like this giant gum wad, and you're like, where's everything going?
It's weird. It's like, and it feels complicated, it's like, oh, not another thing I've got to bolt on, it's like.
Right. If I had to go back and start it all over again, sometimes I don't even know if I can remember all the things that I did. It was just like one project at a time. And just like you said, bolting something new that I've learned onto, what I already created. So yeah, that would be an amazing resource for independent authors and people who are interested in taking their books to screen, to have everything in one place, and all the coaching that they need and all the resources and the tools, because there's so much to learn, because you take a 80,000 word book to a screenplay, and how many words does that wind up being? Not very many, right?
No, it's actually, there's some sort of very standard rules. It's like an A4 page of script is 1 minute on screen.
Mm.
But what's really interesting when you start going through the process of reading a book and finding um, the elements that are going to make up the script is that you could have 3 pages of description that ends up being 1 line of dialogue and a brief, because in a book, you build this kind of world in people's imagination through words, and there's lots of words. But if you imagine, you pair that back to a script, and you might have spent 3 pages creating the look of this room because it's important, and on screen that's like a living room. It's like, oh, that's one tiny piece of a script. And the other thing that's really interesting is how you have to adapt metaphors. So for example, in a book, you might describe what someone is thinking, but you can't see what someone is thinking on a screen. So then you have to find a way to create a metaphor for what they might be thinking. So a visual metaphor comes out of that thought process. And so there are some like really interesting techniques about adapting a book that are different to writing a script. And it's fun, it can be a really enjoyable process. But you're right. I mean, you could have like a 20,000 word novella that is a full film, or you could have 120,000 words in your book and it's a short movie. It's like there's so many different ways to kind of look at what a book can become, from a screen perspective.
That's so neat. And I love the idea of that, and I love that you said it doesn't have to be hard. You just have to know how to do it and be willing to. So it's almost like a whole new creative entity that comes from something that you had once written. You have to rely on your cinematographer to create your world through the visuals. You have to rely on your characters and their chemistry to create the relationships that you have envisioned. So it's just how neat. I would love to be like involved in seeing all that happen. So I love that you're bringing this to life. What is something for you that's been the hardest part about developing BooksOffice and pulling all this together and essentially running a startup business as an entrepreneur? That's what you're doing. So what's been the hardest part for you about this whole journey?
Resources. It's really difficult because I think that the challenging part is that BooksOffice kind of feels for me like the culmination of everything that I've done in my life. Because I've worked in publishing, I worked in cable TV, I've worked in marketing. So it's kind of like, and I've been an author, so it's kind of like pulled all of those things together. But it's a vision, it's kind of like my vision for BooksOffice is that it's this big entity, and you have to start from this really small place, and it's kind of frustrating because you just have limited resources and you have to put like steps in the right place. And in an ideal world, I'd just like go, okay, I'll have 3 people in my marketing department, I'll have an HR person, and blah blah blah, I'll have 4 more people developing it, and it would just go
right.
But the reality is that you have to start with a kernel of something and test and test and test. And one of the things that I think probably is frustrating has been a little bit frustrating for the authors is that in the development process, you build something based on theory. And so you kind of do as much as you can to test whether the system delivers what you want it to deliver. But the reality is that when people come in, you can't predict exactly how they're going to use the system, and sometimes they don't use it the way that you anticipate. So there's a lot of kind of evolution that has to go on to develop a platform that users feel comfortable with.
Sure.
And because BooksOffice is intended to be something very interactive and very big, people kind of get a bit frustrated that they can't just go vote. It's like, okay, no, you've got to register, you've got to set up a little profile. But the point is that further down the road, we're hoping, well, I'm sure, that people will love getting involved with that whole kind of entertainment process. And
Mhm.
we do want to know. We want to know if people want to see Brad Pitt in that movie. We want to know if Jennifer Aniston should be playing the lead role in this story. It's like we do want people to have some fun with
Mhm.
the whole entertainment process. You know, so it is a little bit frustrating starting with limited resources in this kind of small environment. But the way it will be exciting for people. Yeah.
Yes, you're creating your ball of gum. You're starting here, and you got to keep sticking the stuff to it.
Yeah.
Your gum ball is starting.
Yeah.
Your wad of gum. That's a weird analogy, but I think it's sort of like that. But that's really exciting. And like we said earlier in the interview, this is just the infancy of this project that you're working on. And I really do see that once you've done the testing and you've figured it out and you've gone through a couple projects, there is a story, I believe, that you can tell around what you're creating that is going to engage not just the creative community, but people that support it
Yeah.
to get involved. I mean, look at the success of Patreon. Patreon is a
Mhm.
is a place where people who love a band, or people who love an author, or people who love a filmmaker, or people who love a particular creative can go and donate, $3 a month, which is the cost of a coffee, to
Yeah.
support this author or this musician to make things faster, right? So there are people that are interested in supporting being patrons of the arts, and this is another platform for them to do that and have a say in what content is being created. I see once you get everything like aligned, that there is just a huge story through a PR movement that you could push out and just bring people to you, and then it could be like the whole next Facebook for creatives. Who knows? But there's so much potential, and I understand that want to go fast, and get it going.
Yeah.
And I understand the restraint of resources, and time is a resource that's often
Sure.
constrained too, right? You can't get enough time in the day to get everything created that you want to get into the world. And, I get that.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I'm really lucky because I actually met an actress who's very famous in the UK, Leslie Ash, and she was in a TV series called Men Behaving Badly, and she's done lots of British TV, and she actually stepped up to play one of the roles in Gin and It, and she's now my business partner
Oh,
on Bookoffice,
cool.
and which is amazing. And so we have, and I really would love to do this in other parts of the world, but um, her husband owns a quite trendy bar in London, and so now every month we have an event for our authors. And we have actors and producers and writers and authors who all come together in this room and have a few drinks and just chat about what's going on in the industry, what they'd like to do, and it's a fabulous networking event. And it's kind of like it really gets people inspired, to finish their stories, to write something else, to go for the opportunity to go from book to screen. And it's interesting what you say, because I think the opportunity to create a closer relationship between authors and the entertainment community, the crew and the cast and the producers is a fabulous one, because you can just see people starting to get really inspired
Hmm.
by talking about their stories. And of course, actors they want stories, they want roles, they're born to perform, and so they really interested in talking to authors. They want to know about your characters, they want to know what the opportunities are to play those characters, and it's wonderful to watch authors talking to actors.
Ah, I have goosebumps. I love this. That's so exciting. That is so cool. And I just love that. And I want to, circle back to something you said. That was collaboration, which is what you recommended. Collaborate with, it doesn't just have to be artists or authors in your same niche. It's the community of people.
Oh,
Like, there's collaboration always inspires, and we're not each other's competition. We lift each other up when we work together. And
absolutely.
I love
Yeah.
that. Okay, so I asked you the hardest thing, and I think you might have just mentioned a little bit of the best part of being it is like this collaboration that you see going on and connecting the authors with the industry. But what else have you really enjoyed about? What's been the best part about this process that for you?
It's inspiring people.
Mm.
It's been it. I'll tell you a story that will come out quite soon, and I'll give you the nub of it. But so I met with a friend when I was the website hadn't launched. I told her what I was intending to do, and I said I really want to help people tell stories who maybe haven't had a voice. I just feel like there's so much potential out there. And she said, I want to show you something on my bookshelf. And she took me to see her bookshelf, and there were 14 manuscripts on this bookshelf that had never seen the light of day. And this lady, she's a wonderful woman, but she's a photographer actually, but she used to run a fan club for a very famous pop singer in the UK. And these books had been written by this pop singer's brother.
Oh, wow.
And he is now 75 years old. And these books have never seen the light of day. And he had made an audio recording of one of them, which I listened to, and it was hilarious. And I said, she said, oh, he's given up on it. And I said, do you think he'd talk to me? So I went to see him, and he's a really fascinating man. And I said, well, would you just send me one or some of your books that you would like, potentially to see out in the world? And he sent me this trilogy, and it is epic. I
Oh,
mean, it's
wow.
unbelievable. And they're going to be published.
Oh, wow. You had a
Yeah.
piece in bringing his dream to life. I mean, I'm so glad you shared this story, because how many creative people do you think have manuscripts possibly sitting on their shelves that are never going to see the light of day, that are wonderful? And what would you say to those people? What would you say to those people, Elaine?
If you even people get sort of like hung up on being judged.
Mm.
I think a lot of people were kind of like, well, what if it goes nowhere, or what if it doesn't happen? I'm going to come back to something earlier that I talked about, which was kind of very emotional, and that was my first wife passing. And this, I can tell you, everybody with 100% certainty. At the end of the day, you get one life. What you don't want to do is to get to the end of your life and say, why didn't I do that?
Mm.
And it doesn't matter whether you sell one book or 50 books or 50,000 books. What matters is you told your story. And, just do it. Just, you have got to sort of like go through the process of understanding how to put the thing out there, but just do it. Just get your story out there. There's an audience for every story. And our stories are really important. And as you say, it could take off. It could find its home. There's all sorts of ways that stories get found. But the most important thing is for you personally, tell your story.
Yeah. Oh,
Tell your
I am so moved right now, and I love that analogy too of like, you don't want to get to the end of this one beautiful, authentic, unique life that is all your own, because there's never going to be another you. There's never going to be another me. And say, why didn't I do that thing I wanted to do? And I mean, I think that is the most incredible advice that you can leave with any creative or anybody who has a burning dream or burning desire to just, it's scary. Oh my goodness, is it scary? Being, putting something beautiful like that you made into the world to have people either love or hate is very scary. But I think it's more scary to be like, I never did anything, and
yes,
why? Because I was too afraid, right?
yes.
So great advice, Elaine. And I have so enjoyed having you on the show today. I feel like I could talk to you for like another 3 hours. And we will certainly revisit this conversation. And I'd love to talk to you again after you get your first project underway and you start building BooksOffice into this beautiful, wonderful thing that it is already is, but I think it's going to continue to become this amazing entity for creatives. So thank you for the work you're doing. Would you please share with people where they can find you and more information about BooksOffice online, which I'll also link to in the show notes so people can get directly there?
Sure. First of all, I want to say thank you very much. I've absolutely loved talking to you. If you're a writer or a reader or a viewer and you want to get involved, just go to booksoffice.com. It's free to sign up. And there's no reason not to. There's lots of people looking at it. It's a great opportunity. So do that. So the first thing is booksoffice.com. Go to the group, join the Facebook group. There's a Facebook group. There's a lot of fun going on in there. There's lots of kind of updates on what we're doing, lots of pictures from our events, and people kind of like quite buzzy in there. So that's a really good place to go. I'm actually quite shy. So you can find out a bit about me. I will always talk to people. So I have a Facebook page. You can find out about Gin and It on ginandit.tv. Yeah, so I've got a Facebook authors page and my personal page. So, yeah, get in touch.
Okay, awesome. And I'll link to those pages in the show notes so people can get to you easily. And Elaine, I am just so excited and so inspired having just talked to you. And, you don't occur to me as shy at all. So well done. Well done. And, it's funny you mentioned that, though, because a lot of us creatives are a bit introverted and a little bit shy. Thank you so much for the gift of your time. I cannot wait to get this episode out, and hopefully you'll see a surge of new authors come to your site and support what you're doing.
Fantastic. It's lovely to talk to you, really, anytime.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlykadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlykadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlykadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Kade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.